October 2012. Cold air enveloped Dunn County, Wisconsin, as the city crew began draining Lake Wakanda, where water levels had hit a record low after a rare drought. Flashlight beams reflected off the dark mud, illuminating a strange object emerging from the lake's edge. "Dispatch, I need backup at Lake Wakanda, and send the coroner's investigator now," a worker's voice crackled over the radio, trembling but resolute. What started as routine maintenance had turned into a crime scene, and what they found would answer a question haunting the town of Elk Mound for 36 years. Amid the wet mud, forensic experts uncovered a female skeleton wrapped in dark fabric, still bearing traces of old stitching. Nearby was a rusted bicycle and a brown leather bag containing a faded piece of notebook paper with 2 smudged words, Linda M. Under the light, they also found a metal button engraved with an H, the only remaining trace of Linda Mae Harper, the 17-year-old who vanished from Elk Mound on the morning of October 15, 1976. For nearly 4 decades, Linda's disappearance lingered like a shadow in the townsfolk's memory. She was last seen pedaling through a fog-covered dirt road, wearing a red jacket, her leather bag slung over her shoulder, before she disappeared. 3 days later, her jacket washed up near Lake Wakanda, its collar torn, a strand of blonde hair caught in the metal clasp, but no one found her. Case file #76 each 214 missing juvenile. Possible foul play was gradually shelved as unsolved. The discovery at Lake Wakanda was not just the end of a missing person case. It was the first domino in a chain of events that shook the state of Wisconsin, exposing secrets buried for decades in a seemingly peaceful community. When the Madison lab completed DNA testing, the results stunned everyone. Male DNA on the jacket matched Daniel Harper, Linda's brother, with 99.9% certainty. When police knocked on Daniel's small house in Appleton, he didn't resist. "If she's dead," he said, "I don't remember doing anything." That statement reopened a case, thought long dormant, launching a prolonged investigation with scientists, detectives, and prosecutors diving into a quest for truth obscured by time. Before continuing this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring forgotten cases back into the light, where science and justice speak together. Because when Dunn County finally identified a suspect and made an arrest in 2012, it wasn't a stranger or an anonymous killer, it was someone the town had once mourned with, once trusted, the victim's brother. The Harper case wasn't just a mystery solved, it was a testament to the power of forensic science, the persistence of cold case investigators, and the voice of a young girl silenced in the fog for 36 years. This is a story of loss, guilt, and justice delayed but not denied. A story that forced Wisconsin to confront itself and ask, does any crime truly sleep beneath those still waters? The autumn morning of 1976 in Elk Mound was as quiet as ever. The air was crisp, white fog blanketing the dry cornfields, bare stalks trembling in the thin breeze. The scent of wood smoke from farmhouse chimneys mingled with damp earth, and the dirt road to the highway faded into the fog like a silver ribbon. Linda Mae Harper, 17, pedaled down that road to high school. Her red jacket stood out against the white fog, her brown leather bag swinging behind her, the bike's tires rolling through wet mud, leaving small tracks like a morning signature. She took that route every day, carefully avoiding the narrow bend near the woods, where the fog often thickened to obscure anything beyond 10 steps. That day, a few farmers saw her figure glide past the hilltop, her red bike veering onto the path by the woods, before vanishing into the fog, as if swallowed. When the school bell rang and Linda hadn't arrived, no one noticed immediately. Sometimes she overslept or stopped at the nearby store for a coffee milk. But by noon, her mother, Evelyn Harper, sensed something was wrong. On the kitchen table, Linda's packed sandwich remained, the morning's milk glass bearing a faint lipstick mark. Evelyn threw on a coat, calling for her daughter along the dirt road, hearing only the wind rustling through dry corn. Her father, Charles, returned from the dairy farm to find his wife standing in the fog, her voice breaking, she didn't come home. They searched every road around the house, their footsteps sinking into the mud, calling Linda's name to no response, but distant barking dogs. As the afternoon light turned golden, they found Linda's red bicycle leaning in a ditch, its tires still wet, the paint streaked with brown mud. There were no signs of a struggle, only a glove dropped nearby, as if someone had hastily left it behind. Evelyn stood frozen, her trembling hand clutching the glove, while Charles scanned the area, his eyes clouding in the thick fog. They said nothing, both sensing something terrible creeping closer, slow as the chill crawling up their necks. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Charles dialed the Dunn County Sheriff's Office. The phone rang long before a gruff male voice answered. "Sheriff's Office, what's the issue?" Evelyn took the receiver, her voice catching. "Our daughter, she didn't come home." On the other end, the officer's voice echoed through the receiver. "Can you clarify?" But Evelyn couldn't. Her throat tightened, her hand still gripping the cold glove. Charles stepped in, taking the receiver and saying only, "My daughter is missing." 15 minutes later, the headlights of a patrol car swept across the fog-wet trees in front of the Harper house. Sheriff Frank Colburn stepped out, his black leather jacket dusted with dirt, eyes narrowing in the dim light. He had never investigated a missing person case in this town. Elk Mound was so peaceful that people left their doors unlocked at night. But that night, everything changed. The police sealed off the dirt road, calling in 2 patrol cars from Menomonee and a volunteer group. They began searching in the dark, as fog blanketed the cornfields and the hum of insects blended with the whispering wind. Evelyn stood at the door, eyes fixed on the void where the road disappeared into the woods. Charles joined the police, carrying a flashlight and a wooden stick. They followed tire tracks pressed into the wet earth until the flashlight beam glinted off the metal frame of the red bicycle. It lay tilted in the ditch, tires still wet, gleaming in the fog. Colburn crouched, scanning the area. No blood, no signs of a struggle, just a glove nearby, caked in mud with a few fine hairs. He put on gloves, picked it up, and stood silent for a long moment before turning to Charles. "You sure this is hers?" Charles nodded, eyes fixed on the bike. The wind grew stronger, dry corn leaves rustling like distant whispers. "We'll search all night," Colburn said, his voice low but firm. They split into groups, one following the road to the highway, another circling the forest edge. Flashlights swept the ground, their beams fragmented like scattered memories. A canine unit named Duke was let loose, sniffing slowly around the bike before heading into the woods. He barked twice, then stopped, sniffing the air and looking back at his handler, unsure where to go next. The fog was too thick, the wind shifting constantly, erasing nearly all traces of scent. By midnight, snow began to fall, tiny flakes melting on contact with the ground. Colburn called a halt, fearing they'd trample evidence. They'd resume at dawn. As the search team withdrew, only 2 figures remained by the road, Charles and Evelyn. She still clutched the glove, her knuckles white. "She hasn't gone far," she whispered. Charles didn't reply. He looked toward the woods, where fog and snow blended into a blank white, as if the world were swallowing everything. The next morning, the police rallied more help. Word spread fast. Men brought lanterns, shovels, and hunting dogs. Women prepared coffee and blankets for the searchers. Elk Mound had never been so crowded, yet no one spoke loudly. They moved in lines, sweeping every meter of ground around Lake Wakanda. Some called Linda's name, their voices hoarse, echoing back empty. No body, no blood, nothing but fog and snow. That afternoon, a reporter from the Dunn County News arrived, snapping photos of the bicycle propped at the sheriff's station, the frame blurred by moisture. The next day's article was brief. "Missing girl, 17, last seen near Elk Mound Road. Investigation ongoing." Residents read it, folded the paper, and stared out their windows, where the fog still lingered. Each carried the same unspoken question. Was Linda Harper still alive, or had she merged with the fog enveloping the town? 3 days after Linda vanished, Elk Mound sank into a heavy silence, like the thin snow dusting the fields. Searches repeated tirelessly, from the woods to the roads, then around the small lake north of town, where people fished on weekends. That morning, with the sun still struggling through thick fog, a man named Harold Denton, a resident near Lake Wakanda, spotted something odd while rowing out from shore. Amid the cold gray water, a patch of red fabric caught on a dry branch sticking up from the lake. At first he thought it was a plastic bag, but as he drew closer, He recognized a woman's jacket, heavy with water, its deep red turned brown. Harold pulled it aboard, tossed it onto the boat's floor, and stood frozen for a moment before heading back to shore. He called the police. When Sheriff Colburn and his team arrived, the fog still hadn't lifted. The lake's surface was so still that the boat's motor sounded like a crack in the silence. The jacket was laid on a blue tarp, water dripping onto the cold ground. Colburn unbuttoned it, lifting the collar with a pen. A long blonde hair clung to the fabric, curled like a wet thread. An officer snapped a photo with a Pentax film camera, the flash glinting off the lake before fading, leaving only frozen breath in the air. "Probably hers," Colburn said quietly. "Matches the description in the file." They spread the tarp, noting details by hand: fabric color, button count, a small scratch on the left sleeve. Loose threads hung at the shoulder, as if someone had grabbed or pulled it hard. Nearby, the ground was still soft, marked with parallel tire tracks from a dual-axle truck, vanishing at the forest edge. Colburn knelt, measuring. The tracks were 63 inches apart, matching a Ford F-100. He noted it, ordering officers to photograph the area. But hours later, rain came, small, persistent drops falling all afternoon, washing away the soft soil. When the tech team returned, the tire tracks were just faint smears in the mud. Colburn stood in the rain, his jacket soaked, staring at the ripples spreading across the lake. "God," he whispered, "we're losing everything." They collected what they could: soil on the jacket, the dry branch, a few loose threads. Everything was sealed in brown paper bags, taped shut, labeled by hand. Exhibit A, Harper case. DNA testing and sample preservation weren't available then. It all relied on observation and instinct. A young officer asked, "Can we tell if the jacket was dumped here or drifted?" Colburn shook his head. "No way to know, but if she got lost, why's the jacket here?" He looked around, the fading daylight glinting on the water like shattered glass. In the distance, a lone bird's wings echoed through the fog. In his handwritten report, Colburn noted briefly, "Garment recovered, females likely, no signs of struggle. Area indicates vehicle presence." He closed the notebook, slipping it into his wet coat pocket. On the drive back, the patrol car rolled through muddy roads, tires creaking. Evelyn Harper stood on her porch, a thin shawl draped over her, and saw the jacket in its paper bag. She recognized it instantly. Linda's, the one she'd sewn a button onto the day before her daughter vanished. She stepped forward to touch it, but Colburn gently stopped her. "We need to keep it as is. I'm sorry." Evelyn said nothing, staring at the ground where her daughter's footsteps once marked each morning. That night, the rain stopped, but the fog thickened. In a small room behind the Dunn County Sheriff's Station, the smell of damp paper and cigarette smoke mingled. Sheriff Frank Colburn sat hunched over an old wooden desk, a yellowed lamp casting light on scattered papers. Before him was the sealed paper bag with the red jacket, a few crime scene photos, and the now dry blonde hair. He opened his notebook, flipping to a new page, writing the first line: "Case File 76H214, Missing Juvenile, Linda Mae Harper." His ballpoint pen moved slowly, the letters slightly shaky from cold and exhaustion. This was the first missing person case in his 20-year career, and perhaps the first in the town's history. Outside, light rain pattered on the tin roof, ticking like a countdown clock. Colburn began the familiar task, interviewing anyone who might have known Linda. The next morning, he visited Elk Mound High School. In the empty classroom, dim light filtered through fogged windows. The principal, Mrs. Cleary, handed him Linda's student file, her voice softening when mentioning her name. She was a good kid, never skipped class. She said, "Linda often stayed late to clean the lab, and sometimes took a shortcut through the woods to get home early." "Did anyone usually go with her?" Colburn asked. "No," she shook her head. "Only once did I see her brother pick her up in an old truck." Leaving the school, Colburn stopped by the small general store where local teens often hung out. The owner, Mr. Jarvis, was wiping the counter and looked up when he saw the sheriff. "Sheriff, about the Harper girl." He recalled that morning when he opened the store, seeing a green Ford F-100 parked across the road, engine running, exhaust faintly rising in the fog. "I thought it was just a farm truck. Didn't see anyone inside." Colburn took detailed notes, asking, "Did you catch the license plate?" Jarvis shook his head. "Couldn't see clearly, but I remember an eagle sticker on the back window." That detail made Colburn look up. an eagle sticker, a common symbol on veterans' vehicles, and Charles Harper was a Vietnam vet. That afternoon, Colburn returned to the Harper house. Charles opened the door, his eyes sunken, hair disheveled. He insisted he hadn't left the house the morning his daughter disappeared. When Colburn asked about the green Ford F-100, Charles said it was Daniel's, his son's. He worked at a lumber yard near Menomonee. Daniel couldn't be involved, Charles said, his voice hardening. He loves his sister. You know him. Colburn didn't respond, just jotted in his notebook. He'd met Daniel before, a lanky, quiet boy with evasive eyes. For now, it was all speculation. Over the next few days, he interviewed neighbors one by one. Mrs. McAllister, living 2 miles from the Harpers, recalled hearing a truck engine through the fog that morning, but only saw its tail end fading behind the trees when she looked out. Mr. Grady, the school bus driver, said he didn't see Linda on her usual route. A classmate, Nora Finch, mentioned Linda seemed sad for a few days prior, but didn't know why. All the accounts were fragmented, with nothing connecting them. That evening, Colburn returned to his office, stacking thick reports on his desk. He underlined, Ford F-100. Green, eagle decal, unidentified driver. On the corner of the desk, a photo of Linda stared straight at the camera, her small smile like a faint light. He sighed, glancing around the room, where only the clock ticked. The streetlight outside cast a dim glow on the fogged window. In his 10th day report, he wrote, no new evidence, no confirmed sightings. Possible connection to vehicle seen near Menomonee Road. He closed the notebook, but one question lingered, who drove that truck, and why was it there when Linda vanished? A week later, he had all Ford trucks registered in Dunn County, checked. Only 3 F-100 seds were green, none had an eagle decal. The list ended with Daniel Harper, owner of a 1975 metallic green Ford. When his deputy read the name, Colburn looked up. Note it, but don't contact yet, he said quietly. We don't have anything solid. Time passed, the snow thickened, and the road by the lake where the jacket was found was blocked by ice. The police had no new leads. At the town diner, people whispered when mentioning the Harpers. Each day, Colburn went to his office, opened the case file, reread every line, then closed it with the same emptiness. He knew the evidence was weak, and winter was erasing the last traces. On the last night of the year, he sat alone in his office, writing a few shaky lines, no body, no suspect, no closure. Outside, snow fell lightly on the window, blending into the dark forest beyond. Under the dim desk lamp, the red jacket in its paper bag sat silently on the shelf. The only remnant of Linda Mae Harper, and the starting point for a file he never expected to reopen decades later. Daniel Harper was called to the station on a cold January morning. Snow still covered the roofs and paths, the wind from the woods near Lake Wakanda howling like a persistent reminder. In a small room smelling of cigarette smoke and stale coffee, Sheriff Colburn set a recorder on the table, flipped the switch, and looked at the 18-year-old sitting across from him. Daniel was thin, his brown hair messy, hands clenched on his knees. His gaze was dull, avoidant, as if he just wanted the questioning over. "Where were you the morning Linda disappeared?" Colburn asked calmly. Daniel answered quickly, almost rehearsed, "At home. I slept late, didn't leave my room until noon. Dad can confirm." Colburn leaned forward, tapping the table lightly. "A neighbor heard your truck's engine early, around when the fog was thick." "Care to explain?" Daniel looked up, hesitating. "Maybe Dad used it." "I don't recall exactly, could have been a mistake. Sound carries from the farm nearby. It's like my truck." Colburn didn't reply, just stared, then scribbled notes. The soft scratch of his pen filled the room, mingling with their steady breaths. After a few more questions, Daniel was let go. There was nothing concrete to hold him. But as Daniel left the station, Colburn sat still, watching through the window. Something about how Daniel spoke, the slight tremble in his shoulders when asked about the truck, unsettled him. He called his deputy, ordering a check on the green Ford F-100 registered to Daniel Harper. The truck was found in a shed behind the farm, covered in dust, dried mud caked in the tire treads. Colburn knelt, shining a flashlight. No blood, no scratches, just a small piece of fabric caught in the door hinge. He pried it out, slipped it into a plastic bag. It was later labeled Exhibit Bud. But at the time, nothing proved it tied to Linda. When Charles Harper heard the police check the truck, he was furious. He stormed to the station, slamming Colburn's desk. "You're saying my son killed his sister?" he growled, voice hoarse from liquor and sleeplessness. Colburn stayed calm. "I'm not saying that, Charles, but I have to verify every possibility." "What possibility?" "He's my son. He loved her more than I did." Evelyn stood by, pale, whispering, "If checking the truck helps find Linda, let them." Her words silenced Charles. From then on, a distance grew between them. Days later, Colburn returned to the Harper house, trying to speak with Daniel alone. He was fixing guitar strings, dim light casting shadows on his gaunt, sleepless face. "I heard you were close with your sister," Colburn began. Daniel nodded faintly. "We grew up together. She was smart, always wanted to leave this town. I didn't ever fight." Daniel shook his head, eyes down. "No, nothing serious. I just didn't want her leaving home." A long pause followed. Colburn waited, but Daniel said no more. He stood, pausing at the door, saying softly, "If you remember anything, even small, come to me." Daniel only nodded. Rumors spread. At the town diner, whispers claimed the police suspected the brother. Some even said they saw Daniel drive out of town that morning. Each story added a detail, and no one knew what was true. At school, students eyed each other warily when mentioning the Harpers. Evelyn stopped going to the morning market. Charles drank more, often sitting in the garage for hours, staring at the dusty truck without a word. Colburn questioned Daniel twice more that month. Every answer was identical, not a word out of place. When asked why he didn't join the search for his sister, Daniel said quietly, "I couldn't stand watching them dig around the lake. I knew they wouldn't find anything." The statement made Colburn jot a note, emotionally detached, but he also knew sometimes the innocent run out of ways to show their pain. After 3 weeks, the investigation stalled. No new witnesses, no further evidence. The Dunn County court ordered the police to stop pursuing due to insufficient grounds. The case was labeled open inactive. In his final report, Colburn wrote, "No probable cause to detain suspect. Insufficient evidence." He stared at the words a long time before closing the notebook. That afternoon, leaving the station, he passed the Harper house. The sunset lit the closed windows, faint smoke rising from the chimney. He saw Daniel washing the truck in the yard, sleeves rolled up, cold water steaming in the air. He scrubbed the mud from the tires, then stopped, staring into space. For a moment their eyes met. Daniel gave a slight nod, a faint smile flickering before fading. Colburn drove off, but in the rearview mirror the image lingered, a thin figure in the yard, holding a running hose, as if trying to wash away something he couldn't name. The Linda Harper case paused there. The file sat on a wooden shelf behind Colburn, its cover yellowing. But in the town's heart, and in his own mind, the name Daniel Harper was never crossed out. In 1980, 4 years after Linda Harper vanished, the case was officially marked unsolved. A red stamp slashed across the hardcover, inactive investigation. In the Dunn County Sheriff's Office archive, old cardboard boxes were stacked by case order, and among hundreds of names, the box labeled Harper, Linda M. 1976 sat quietly in the lowest corner, near a damp wall. Inside, all evidence was sealed, the red jacket still in its brown paper bag, a fine hair taped to a yellowed card, black and white crime scene photos, and Sheriff Colburn's notebook. Its slanted, cold handwriting like an unfinished message. Signing the transfer report, his hand trembled slightly, the pen pausing at the final line, "No new leads, case to be archived." He stood silently, watching the boxes slide into the dark, then turned away, leaving behind the dry click of a metal lock. Time began to dust over everything. Elk Mound returned to its slow rhythm. The town diner played country music each morning. People discussed harvests, gas prices, and gradually stopped mentioning the Harper girl. Linda's photo, once pinned to the library bulletin board, was replaced by a fall festival notice. She became a faint memory, then unspoken. For older residents, her disappearance became a cautionary tale for kids. Don't walk through the woods when the fog's thick. The Harper family never fully recovered. Charles sold the green Ford F-100 to someone out of town, quit farming, and moved to southern Wisconsin to work in a factory. Evelyn stayed in Elk Mound, living in the old house with unchanged belongings. Each morning she made coffee, sitting by the window overlooking the dirt road Linda once biked to school. On the windowsill, the brown glove was kept, cleaned, and neatly folded in a tin box. Daniel left home in 1978, working at a Menomonee lumber yard, rarely contacting his mother. Rumors about him never stopped, but no one dared say them aloud. In town, wary glances followed him, a quiet distance he learned to endure. Sheriff Colburn retired in 19. He cleared his desk, taking only a Lake Wakanda crime scene photo and his notebook. At his simple retirement party, people toasted his peaceful rest after years of service, but he knew what lingered in his heart, an unanswered question. On his last night in the office, he reopened Linda Harper's file. Under the dim light, the black and white photos still smelled of damp mud and fog. He touched the final note, "No body recovered." Those 3 words were a cold end to it all. Turning off the lamp, he looked at the empty room, hearing early season rain tap the window, knowing some cases don't close, they're only silenced by time. In the years that followed, Linda Harper's name surfaced occasionally in articles about Wisconsin's unsolved disappearances. A brief paragraph, a few statistics, no photo, no details. In Elk Mound, those who knew her aged or moved away, leaving only a few who recalled the girl in the red jacket vanishing into the fog. To the younger generation, she was a local legend, no different from ghost stories about Lake Wakanda. By the late 1980s, the Dunn County Records Room was reorganized. Old cases were sealed in steel boxes and moved to a new basement. A young clerk wrote in black ink on a label, "Harper, Linda Ohm Fall Lie, 1976, unsolved." As the box was shelved, neon light caught the thin dust floating, then flickered out. No one knew that, among hundreds of files, a red jacket scrap and a single hair would lie silent for 36 years, waiting to be reopened. And as Elk Mound slowly forgot the girl from that foggy season, the truth remained, buried deep, cold, but never gone. 35 years later, Wisconsin's winter returned with the same pale light and snow-laden roads. In the basement archive of the Wisconsin Department of Justice in Madison, thousands of case boxes lined the walls, handwritten labels faded with time. Most belonged to cases no one mentioned anymore, names reduced to letters and numbers. In that room, Marcia Lowe, a 36-year-old forensic technician, walked through rows of metal racks, carrying a list of old files to review for the Cold Case Initiative launched in early 2011. Her task seemed simple: check evidence conditions, identify cases viable for new STR DNA testing funded by the state. Lowe had worked on countless cases: theft, assault, unsolved murders. But she always paused at files marked personal belongings, items holding traces of real lives. One afternoon, as light from a small window fell on the lower racks, she saw a handwritten label, ink blurred, Harper, Linda M/1976, unsolved. The name stopped her. Lowe pulled the box out, its thick cover worn at the edges, still sealed with Dunn County's red wax stamp. She blew off the dust, set it on the examination table, and opened it gently. Inside, everything was neatly arranged in the old-school way. A brown paper bag with the red jacket, labeled Exhibit A on a card, a small envelope with a blonde hair taped inside, and Sheriff Colburn's notebook, its green ink still legible. Garment recovered near Lake Wakanda, no blood, female hair sample. Wearing gloves, Lowe opened the jacket's bag. The faint smell of old fabric and mildew wafted out, carrying a sense of touching time. The jacket still showed the tear at the left shoulder, loose threads as described in the report. She held the hair envelope under the light, a fine, slightly curled strand, brighter than the paper. On the envelope's corner, a man's slanted handwriting read, "Found on collar." Per protocol, she logged, "Specimen condition, intact. DNA potential, high. Cases from the 1970s rarely had clean enough evidence for extraction, often rotted or contaminated. But the Harper evidence was different. Preserved the old way, strictly, paper bags, dry environment, no plastic sealing like later years. This inadvertently kept the DNA from fully degrading. Lowe took the evidence bag to the second-floor DOJ lab. She presented her findings to the lab head, Dr. Raymond Choi, a cautious Korean-American forensic biologist. He reviewed the photos, nodding, "If the bag's intact, we can try STR extraction. Even for an old sample, there's a chance." Lowe registered a new case code, CC 2011-274, Harper Case, STR Re-examination. The lab results reached Marcia Lowe's desk on a Monday morning, in a white envelope stamped Confidential, State Evidence. Opening it, the genetic data sheet filled with numbers and markers made the room feel oddly still. The STR analysis confirmed. Male DNA, successfully extracted from the hair found on Linda Harper's collar in 19... The profile was stable enough for a full CODIS comparison. At the bottom, a bolded line cut like a cold knife. Match confirmed. Harper, Daniel M., male, 53, Appleton, Wisconsin. Probability, 99.9%. The name Harper wasn't unfamiliar. It appeared dozens of times in the file, always with Colburn's note. Brother questioned. No charges filed. For 35 years, the brother had been a shadow in an unsolved case. She wondered what Colburn, if alive, would think of this result. Per protocol, the report was sent to the head of Wisconsin's Cold Case Unit, Lieutenant Edgar Holtz. Reading match confirmed, he only raised an eyebrow, twirling an unlit cigarette between his fingers. "No mistake?" he asked, voice low. "Impossible," Marcia replied. The sample's clean, no contamination, STR fully matched. It's Daniel Harper's DNA. Holtz nodded slowly, standing to look through the fogged window. 35 years. And finally, the evidence speaks. He ordered the report sent to Dunn County Sheriff's Office, where the case began and stalled. That afternoon, the Harper 1976 file landed on Holtz's desk. He personally signed "Reopen Recommended" at the bottom, sealed it with the DOJ stamp, and placed it in an internal delivery envelope. In the summary, he added a brief note. Suggest field investigation. Potential familial homicide. The words were dry, emotionless, but enough to alter a man's fate. Dunn County Sheriff's Office received the package on Thursday morning. Acting Chief Lieutenant Edgar Holtz called his subordinate, Agent Riley Mendez, the youngest in the cold case unit. "We just got a case back from Madison," Holtz said, voice half smoking, half thinking. "Old name, new results. Harper, remember the girl who vanished in '76? The Elk Mound case?" Mendez replied. "The red jacket? Exactly. They found DNA. It's her brother's." A few seconds of silence followed, only the rustle of papers. Mendez exhaled. "After all those years, prep the file. We're heading back to the scene. Need to verify before charging. No mistakes." Holtz stubbed out his cigarette, his eyes glinting coldly. In the next day's brief meeting, the four-person cold case team sat around an old wooden table. Holtz spread out the DNA results, the red jacket photo, and Colburn's final note. No body recovered. He spoke slowly, voice hoarse but firm. For 35 years, Linda Harper was just a name in storage. Now, technology's speaking for her. DNA doesn't lie. Mendez asked, "Any chance of cross-contamination?" The brother lived in the same house. Could have gotten hair on the jacket earlier. "Unlikely," Holtz replied. "The hair was caught in the torn collar threads, like it was yanked hard. And it's the only sample with male DNA. Not a coincidence." He paused, then continued. "We'll verify every angle, but even if it was an accident, this is the first truth in 35 years. The team began reviewing the original file. Blurry black and white photos, Colburn's handwritten notes, neighbor statements from back then, all were scanned again. When Mendez flipped to Daniel Harper's 1976 interview, the line "Subject claims to have slept late" stood out under smudged ink. He read softly, "Slept late, but a neighbor heard a truck engine early." Holtz nodded slightly. That detail was overlooked for lack of evidence. Now we have something much stronger. That afternoon, they sent a formal request to Madison for a second independent test. The lab responded quickly. Duplicate test confirms match, 99.92%. The evidence was undeniable. On Holtz's desk, the Linda Harper file was reopened. A new cover tagged with a red label, Cold Case Reactivated, 2011. He stared at it for a long time. In his mind, he saw the black and white photo of a young girl, her shy smile, gentle eyes. Below the photo, Colburn's note, last seen riding her bicycle toward Menomonee Road. That night, Holtz stayed late. Light snow dusted his car parked outside. In the dark room, he turned on a small radio, its crackling signal playing a report about Wisconsin's investment in upgraded DNA labs. The anchor's warm voice spoke of new chances for forgotten justice. Holtz leaned back, closing his eyes. He'd seen dozens of old cases reopened by a single hair, a dried blood drop. But each time, he felt something heavier than joy, a belated guilt, as if justice didn't arrive, but returned to ask why it took so long to find the truth. The next morning, the Harper 1976 reinvestigation notice was sent to all state police offices. The subject line was brief, cold case reinvestigation authorized. Below Holtz's signature and the DOJ seal stood clear. The final fax reached Dunn County at 8:43 a.m., the paper still warm. The duty officer, receiving it, set it on the desk, muttering, "My God, the Linda Harper case." After 35 years, the file was back in the light. No one knew what would be found next. But for the first time since that foggy 1976 season, the Elk Mound disappearance was no longer a whispered old tale. It was back, carrying the voice of a single hair and the new testimony of time itself. Lieutenant Edgar Holtz was officially assigned to the Linda Harper case in early February 2011. The reinvestigation order was signed after the DNA match was confirmed a second time. In the DOJ records, he was described as one of Wisconsin's most seasoned investigators, having worked dozens of complex homicides in northern Wisconsin. Silver-haired, with a low, slow voice and cautious eyes that hid his thoughts. "This file's older than some of you," he said, placing the thick dossier on the table. "We have no living witnesses, but we have technology Colburn didn't back then. The difference is time, and time, if you know how, tells the truth." With him was Agent Riley Mendez, 32, Mexican-American, formerly in the Forensic Tech Unit. Mendez was young, sharp, and skeptical, asking questions others shied away from. When Holtz handed him the old files, he read for 3 hours straight, scribbling notes in the margins. The 15-centimeter stack included handwritten statements, crime scene photos, the 1980 investigation suspension report, and the latest DNA results. All spread across the wooden table, the old pages rustling like wind through a forest. Their first task was to review all 1976 witnesses. Many had died or left the state, but some still lived near Elk Mound. Holtz and Mendez drove there on a frigid February morning, fog veiling the snow-covered hills. The village was nearly unchanged, the old gas station, small diner and church still on Main Street. At the diner, they met Mr. Jarvis, the former general store owner, now in his 70s. He looked at the photo of the green Ford F-100 in the file, nodding slowly. "I remember that truck that morning. It was parked across the street, engine running. I thought the driver stopped to buy something, but no one came in. When I looked again, it was gone." Holtz asked, "See the license plate?" He shook his head. "No, but I remember an eagle decal on the back window." Mendez glanced at Holtz. The detail matched Colburn's original report perfectly. That afternoon, they visited Nora Finch, Linda's old classmate. Her house sat outside town, near the dirt road to Lake Wakanda. Nora still recalled that morning. "The fog was thick," she said, voice hoarse. "I was late for school, saw a green truck coming from the woods, mud splashed on both sides. I didn't see who was inside, but I knew the engine sound. Daniel Harper drove a truck like that back then. I'm not sure it was him, but the sound was unmistakable." Back at the Dunn County office, Holtz and Mendez cross-checked statements. In his 1976 interview, Daniel claimed he stayed home until noon, not using the truck. But the crime scene report noted dual-axle tire tracks near the lake, matching a Ford F-100 exactly. "Here's the first gap," Holtz said, voice low but clear. "If his truck left the house that morning, his statement's false." Mendez nodded, pulling a topographic map from a drawer. He marked 3 points: the Harper house, Menomonee Road where the bike was found, and Lake Wakanda's shore. A 6-mile total. If Daniel drove from home to the lake and back before the family noticed, it'd take less than 30 minutes. Holtz mused, enough time to commit a crime, if there was one. They requested a check on old vehicle registrations. Daniel's Ford F-100, sold in 1978, was gone, but a copy of an insurance invoice from that decade remained. Mendez pointed to a line, green metallic paint, eagle decal rear window. He looked up. "It's the truck witnesses describe." Holtz closed the file, eyes heavy. "We need to track him," he said. "Can't let Daniel Harper know the case is reopened. Watch first, his routine, habits, reactions. If something's hidden, it'll show." Monday asked, "He's in Appleton, right? Alone?" "Right. Divorced. No kids. Works as a watch repairman. Neighbors say he's quiet, gentle, the kind everyone thinks couldn't harm a soul." Holtz stood, looking out the window. Snow melted into long streaks on the glass. He held a cigarette pack but didn't light it. "People like that," he said softly, "are either completely innocent or they've learned to live with guilt too long." The next day, the surveillance plan began. Mendez was sent to Appleton, renting an apartment 3 blocks from Daniel's house. He brought a car-mounted camera and long-range recorder. Holtz stayed in Dunn County, handling legal work and evidence retrieval. "No direct contact," he instructed. "Observe. Log everything. Times, habits, contacts. We get no second shot." For 3 weeks, Mendez lived like a shadow in Appleton's quiet suburb. The neighborhood was neat, with trimmed lawns and snow-draped elms. From his rented second-floor window, he could see Daniel Harper's small watch shop on Division Street, a glass front displaying vintage clocks, and a faded wooden sign. "Harper Watch Repair." Since 9, Daniel opened at 8 a.m. sharp, closed at 5 p.m., never off by a minute. At noon, he brought a steel thermos of coffee, sitting alone in the shop. No calls, no visitors. His life mirrored the clocks he fixed. Steady, precise, no excess noise. To Mendez, the silence was both suspicious and pitiable. He tracked Daniel quietly, noting every move. Day 1, goes to work, home, no contacts. Day 2, takes out trash at night. Day 3, buys machinery magazine at bookstore. Everything was so normal, it made Mendez doubt himself. Was this really the man the DNA pointed to? Or just a lonely man living out his years in the silence of ticking clocks? On the 10th morning, Mendez followed Daniel to a small cafe. He always sat at the corner table by the window, ordering black coffee, no sugar, reading the Post-Crescent. When he left, he forgot his half-finished cup. Mendez waited for the staff to clear it, then stepped in, slipping the cup into a sealed plastic bag. It took seconds. Back in his car, he removed his gloves, labeling the bag, Harper, D. Slaw Coffee Cup, 2011-02-17. 2 days later, he collected another sample, a toothbrush from Daniel's trash. After the garbage truck left, Mendez and a forensic tech retrieved a bag with Daniel's address barcode, pulling out a soft blue toothbrush, labeled and sealed. Both samples were sent to the Madison lab within 24 hours, under Holtz's oversight. He called Marcia Lowe, who found the original evidence. "Lowe, I'm sending 2 new DNA samples from the subject," he said. "I need results fast." She replied, "If they're fresh, you'll have them in 72 hours. The 3-day wait dragged like the winter outside. Holtz stayed in the office, staring at Linda Harper's black and white photo pinned to the board. In it, she smiled with her hair tied high, eyes bright. If this tech had come sooner, he thought, maybe Colburn wouldn't have carried that regret to his grave. On Wednesday morning, Marcia Lowe called. Her voice was crisp over the phone. "Lieutenant, results are in. The coffee cup and toothbrush DNA fully matched the 1976 hair sample. Error margin under 0.001%. Same person." Holtz was silent for a moment, gripping the phone. "Thank you, Lowe," he said softly. "You just ended 35 years of silence for a name." That afternoon, they met at the county office. Mendez brought all photos, videos, surveillance logs, over 100 pages. Holtz reviewed each image of Daniel, walking, drinking coffee, washing his hands at the shop sink. Nothing screamed guilt, but all documented his existence. No one hides forever, Holtz said, especially when their own DNA speaks for their past. They prepared a warrant request for Outagamie County, where Daniel lived. Holtz wrote, "Suspect Daniel M. Harper. Probable cause based on forensic DNA evidence matching 1976 case sample." Attached were Lowe's test results and all surveillance evidence. Signing it, his hand trembled slightly. He recalled Colburn's final note in the old file, "No body recovered, no suspect." Now, he was rewriting it with a red stamp. Reopened/warrant requested. That evening, Mendez drove Holtz to a hotel near Lake Wakanda, where they'd rest before executing the warrant in Appleton. Snow fell lightly, the lake frozen still under moonlight. Holtz gazed through the window, saying to himself, 35 years. One hair waited until now to speak. "I wonder how Daniel Harper lived through that time," Mendez replied softly. "Like an old clock, Lieutenant. Still running, but no one knows what's inside." Holtz gave a faint smile, nodding. "Tomorrow we'll open it and see where the hands point." That night, cold winds swept through the woods by the lake, carrying the crackle of breaking ice. In the dark, a small corner of the room glowed where two investigators reviewed papers. On the table, Linda Harper's photo sat beside the bold-printed warrant. State of Wisconsin versus Daniel M. Harper, warrant approved. Holtz carefully folded the paper, slipping it into his coat pocket. "Tomorrow morning," he said quietly, "we knock on his door." Outside, snow fell, silent as it had for 35 years, with one difference. The Linda Harper case was no longer a secret in a file. It was breathing again, slow and steady, with the distant ticking of a clock in the corner. On the morning of January 17, snow fell heavily in Appleton. Gray light reflected off the ice-covered sidewalks, the quiet neighborhood amplifying the hum of a car engine from down the street. Lieutenant Edgar Holtz stood outside a black SUV, his thick coat dusted with snow, checking his watch. 5:50 a.m., he nodded, signaling the task force. 5 officers in bulletproof vests approached, boots crunching on snow. "Quick, no noise," Holtz instructed softly. "He's not the type to resist, but remember, we're touching 35 years of silence." House number 42 sat nestled between quiet streets, its windows fogged. As the team approached, no lights were on. An officer knocked hard. "Police, open the door, we have a search warrant." No response. On the second knock, the door opened. Daniel Harper stood there in a dark sweater, face pale, gray hair disheveled. He showed no panic, just stared for a moment, then stepped back, voice hoarse. "I knew this day would come." 2 officers entered, cuffing him. Daniel didn't resist, only asking, "Will someone tell me why?" Holtz stepped in, eyes fixed on him. "Daniel Harper, you're under arrest by order of the Wisconsin State Court regarding the disappearance and suspected homicide of Linda Mae Harper, 1976. Only the scratch of a pen and the drip of melting snow from the eaves outside." Holtz stared at him, then signaled the team to begin searching the house. The house was eerily tidy. Everything was in place. Wall clocks, a desk with dozens of mechanical parts, screwdrivers and gears lined up perfectly. On a wooden shelf was an old metal box, paint chipped. Inside, they found a military folding knife, its steel blade worn smooth, handle engraved with a faint logo. Holtz gloved up, using tweezers to open the blade. It glinted under the flashlight. "M7 survival knife," he said. "Same type noted in the old file." In the back shed, they found a dusty Ford F-100, tires flat, license plate nearly faded. Under a tarp, the steel bed held toolboxes, rope, and a worn blanket. On the rear window, a faint eagle decal remained, the one witnesses described in 1976. Holtz stood staring at the truck. "It's still here," he said softly. 35 years, and it's still here. In the living room, Mendez found family photos in silver frames, one of Linda and Daniel as kids, smiling brightly by the lake. Another from Thanksgiving 1975, Linda in her red jacket, Daniel's arm around her. The photo silenced the room. "He kept everything," Mendez said quietly, "and lived among it." Holtz ordered all evidence collected, knife, photos, truck, metal box. Each was numbered, labeled, sealed on site. When done, Holtz turned to Daniel, now seated on the sofa, hands cuffed in front, face oddly calm. "Anything to say before we go?" Holtz asked. Daniel looked up. His eyes were tired, voice low. "No one should stay silent too long. But sometimes, silence is the only way to survive." No one replied. Holtz signaled 2 officers to escort him out. Outside, the snow stopped. Morning light blanketed the road, their footsteps leaving fresh tracks. The 53-year-old man walked between 2 officers, head bowed, offering no resistance, no words. At the Appleton station, Daniel was photographed, fingerprinted, and given a basic medical check. He asked for a glass of water, drank slowly, then stared at the wall. When asked if he needed a lawyer, he said only, "I'll talk when I remember something." Meanwhile, in Dunn County, the Madison Forensic Lab received the new evidence from the scene. The knife was sent for blood trace analysis. The Ford was towed and sealed. The photos were digitally scanned for preservation. All bore the new code, Case 76-214. Holtz and Mendez returned to the office, filing a preliminary report. Mendez looked at him, voice heavy. "Do you think he really doesn't remember?" Holtz didn't answer immediately. He gazed out the window, where snow reflected noon sunlight. "Some people truly forget," he said slowly, "and some choose to call their lies forgetting." That afternoon, the preliminary report was sent to the DOJ. Holtz's final line, written in blue ink: "Suspect in custody. Forensic evidence collected. Awaiting confirmation from Madison Lab." As night fell, he stood on the balcony, watching snow cover the parking lot. In his hand was Linda's 1975 photo in her red jacket, now yellowed, her eyes still bright. Holtz spoke softly, like a promise to someone gone 35 years. "We found him, Linda." Now justice starts to speak. The DOJ Madison Forensic Lab received all Harper case evidence in late January 2012. Outside, snow blanketed everything, but inside was another world. Cold fluorescent lights, steady hum of air vents, ethanol scent in the air, items silent for 35 years. The military knife, red jacket, shoes and soil samples, now sat in new sealed bags, labeled Evidence Re-examined, 2012. Dr. Raymond Choi, lab director, oversaw the analysis. He'd approved the case's first DNA test, and now led the full evidence review. "This is a rare chance," he told his technicians. "We're reconnecting a chain of evidence, broken nearly half a century ago. Any mistake could erase justice again." The military knife was placed under a fume hood. Its steel blade, patchy with rust, was still distinct. 4 inches long, pointed tip, slightly curved edge. A technician swabbed the hinge with phenolphthalein solution, which turned pink. Choi checked his stopwatch, nodding, positive for human blood. He ordered a sample extracted for a Castle-Meyer test, confirming blood type O matching Linda Harper's medical records. Next was the red jacket, stored for 35 years. Technicians spread it on a table under UV light. The left shoulder tear was stark, 10.2 centimeters long, frayed edges, dark threads loose. Comparing it to the knife, the tear matched almost perfectly. Choi used a microscope, cut angle, pull force and blade shape align. "It can't be anything else." A preliminary report was drafted on the spot. Under cold light, the red jacket, once Linda's symbol, became her final witness. Meanwhile, another team analyzed Daniel's black leather shoes. Dried soil clung to the sole's grooves, hard as fossil. Samples were matched against Lake Wakanda's sediment from the state's geological archive. The results stunned the team: clay minerals, fine sand and silica pollen ratios nearly identical to the lake's east shore, where the jacket was found. "No chance of coincidence," Choi said. "That's the signature of the only area around the lake with such high feldspar." Simultaneously, technicians extracted trace samples from the knife's handle. Under an electron microscope, they found a tiny red fiber in the hinge groove. Spectroscopic analysis confirmed it was polyester, identical to the jacket's fabric. "This directly links the weapon to the victim," Choi said, voice low but firm. Piece by piece, the morning of 1976 took shape. A knife cutting through a jacket's shoulder, lakeshore soil on the wielder's shoes, DNA on the girl's collar, all pointing to one person. Chai knew these cold numbers were what Colburn never had. 3 weeks later, the comprehensive report was complete. 63 pages, dense with charts, images, and statistical analysis. The cover read, Forensic Correlation Report, Harper Case. The final conclusion stated, the forensic evidence collected from the residence of Daniel M. Harper establishes a direct, consistent, and statistically significant link to the victim, Linda M. Harper. Probability of unrelated occurrence, 0.001%. When the report reached Dunn County, Holtz and Mendez read it in a small meeting room, white light casting shadows on their somber faces. Mendez flipped through, reading summaries aloud. Knife, typo blood, matches jacket tear. Shoes soil matches lake sample. Red fiber in knife, confirmed polyester structure. He looked up, no doubts left. Holtz didn't speak, just stared at the photo of the red jacket under UV light. The small glowing streaks on the fabric looked like stars falling against a dark sky, beautiful and chilling at once. He said softly, that girl left her answer in every thread of her coat. That evening, Holtz sat alone in his office. Outside the window, Madison's sky darkened, snow falling silently, like fine sand. He opened Colburn's old file, its yellowed pages trembling with faded ink. No blood, no suspect. Holtz took a pen, adding beneath it, blood confirmed, suspect identified, case revived. Then he closed it, his hand resting on the cover, feeling as if he'd touched something that had finally settled after 35 years. The next morning, when Mendez brought the report to prosecutor Amanda Torres, she read it for a long time without speaking. She set the final page down, taking a deep breath. Everything matches, biology, geology, physics. This isn't a missing person case anymore, it's a homicide. Holtz nodded, right. And now it's time to turn it into the language of the courtroom. In the cold room, light from the window fell on the newly stamped file, State of Wisconsin v. Daniel M. Harper, Homicide, Investigation 2012. On the last page of the forensic report, a small, non-mandatory note caught everyone's eye. All evidence remains silent until someone is patient enough to listen. Holtz read it over and over, then gave a faint smile. After all those years, Linda Harper was finally heard. The interrogation took place on the morning of February 23, 2012, in the Dunn County Sheriff's Office investigation room. The room, barely 20 square meters, had pale gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, and a camera in the upper right corner. Fluorescent light cast a cold glow, reflecting off the polished table. When Daniel Harper entered, his handcuffs removed, he held only a coffee cup handed to him by the duty officer. The 53-year-old man, gray-haired, in a dark, worn sweater, scanned the room as if trying to place it. He sighed, saying softly, "Looks about the same as in the movies, doesn't it?" Across from him sat Lieutenant Edgar Holtz, with Agent Riley Mendez taking notes beside him. The camera was turned on, the wall clock showing 9:01 a.m. Holtz began calmly. This interrogation is fully recorded to clarify details related to the Linda Harper case, 1976. Do you understand your rights? Daniel nodded. Yes, I understand. And you agree to answer voluntarily? I agree. Holtz opened the file, flipping to the photo of the red jacket under UV light, placing it before Daniel. Recognize this? Daniel looked at the image, eyes narrowing slightly. Linda's coat, he said, voice low. Mom sewed it. She wore it almost every day to school. Holtz nodded slightly. We found your DNA on the collar, and her blood on the folding knife you kept at home. Daniel didn't react, silent for a few seconds, then asked, It's really Linda's blood? Holtz answered bluntly. Yes. The room's air grew thick. Mendez scribbled notes, Holtz watching every small change on the man's face. Daniel placed both hands on the table, rubbing his chin, then spoke slowly. I don't remember doing anything. I only remember that morning we argued. About what? Holtz asked. She wanted to go to school in Madison. I said she was too young to leave home. She laughed, said I didn't get it. Then I went out to fix the truck. After that, it's blank. I don't remember anything. Just waking up to my parents yelling. He paused, eyes fixed on the wall's empty space, voice hoarse. I've tried to remember, but it's like a dark gap between two pictures. Holtz tilted his head. Ever heard of parasomnia? Daniel frowned slightly. You mean sleepwalking? Holtz nodded. Your old medical records show you were treated for sleep disorders at Menomonee Hospital in 19... Daniel looked down, slowly turning the coffee cup. As a kid, I'd wander outside while sleeping. Once Mom found me in the yard, soaked in dew, holding a flashlight. I didn't know how I got there. It happened less later, but sometimes still did. I thought it stopped. Mendez looked up, jotting, possible parasomnia defense. Holtz let a brief silence hang, then said, Do you think something like that happened the morning Linda disappeared? Daniel shook his head slowly. I don't know. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Or maybe I did something my mind couldn't accept. He looked up, eyes cloudy. But I swear, I never wanted to hurt her. Linda was the only person I thought was truly good. Holtz didn't interrupt. He pulled out another photo, the old Ford F-100 in the shed. You kept this truck for 35 years. Why? Daniel looked at the image, a tired smile flickering, because it's the last thing left from that time, when Linda was still here. Did you ever drive it near Lake Wakanda after that day? No, he said firmly. I never went back there. I was afraid of that place. Holtz's voice lowered. We found soil in your shoe treads matching the lake's sediment. Can you explain that? Daniel went silent. He turned the coffee cup, staring at the table. Maybe I went there in a dream. Sometimes I dream I'm walking by the lake, hearing the water. I bend down and see her coat floating. I thought it was just a dream. Mendez glanced at Holtz, saying nothing. Holtz slowly closed the file. Maybe you're right, Daniel. Maybe it was a dream. But the evidence says otherwise. Daniel looked up, his eyes briefly flashing with fear and despair. If the evidence says otherwise, he said softly, then maybe my dream was real. The interrogation lasted 8 hours. They gave him 2 breaks, some food, but Daniel barely touched it. He spoke little, voice steady, never angry or panicked. Each time Holtz mentioned Linda, he took a deep breath, sitting silent for minutes, as if hearing her name from somewhere far away. When asked why he never left the state after the case closed, Daniel only said, I couldn't leave. Everywhere else reminded me of her, so I stayed. When the camera shut off at 5:02 p.m., Holtz stood, looking at him one last time. Anything to add to the record? Daniel replied, No, I just want to say, if I really did it, I must not be human anymore. He looked up, giving a chillingly weary smile, but sometimes, the real monster doesn't remember it existed. Holtz left the room, closing the door behind him. In the hallway, he paused before the surveillance monitor, where Daniel's image remained, head bowed, hands clasped, white light on half his face. Mendez approached, asking quietly, What do you think? Holtz exhaled, voice hoarse. I don't know. Maybe he's lying. Maybe his mind's truly locked somewhere between memory and guilt. But I believe one thing. Linda Harper never left his sleep. That night, the interrogation report was finalized, 47 pages, with an 8-hour video. On the last page, Holtz noted in his familiar slanted handwriting, subject exhibits partial memory loss, emotional detachment, consistent guilt response, possible parasomnia or dissociative episode, to be evaluated by psychiatric specialist. He set the pen down, closing the file. Outside, wind whistled through the empty hallway, carrying thin snow. In the dark room, the wall clock's ticking echoed, the only sound reminiscent of the watch shop where Daniel Harper quietly lived for 3 decades, counting seconds amid memory, guilt, and a dream that never ended. 3 days after the interrogation, Lieutenant Edgar Holtz sent a formal request to Menomonee Memorial Hospital, where Daniel Harper was treated as a teen. Microfilm records were retrieved and sent to the Dunn County Forensic Office. When printed, the cover's first line stood clear, Patient Harper, Daniel M. Admitted December 4, 1973. Diagnosis: sleepwalking episodes, nocturnal agitation. The paper was old, purple ink smudged, but enough to confirm, 3 years before Linda's disappearance, Daniel had at least 4 severe sleepwalking episodes. The treating doctor noted, patient found wandering outdoors during sleep, eyes open, speech incoherent, unresponsive to stimuli. At the end, A line read, "Recommended long-term observation, potential parasomnia." Mendez looked up. He was telling the truth. He had sleepwalking. Holtz didn't reply, just tapped the table lightly. "Sleepwalking doesn't mean innocent," he said. "But it's a key piece." They brought in an independent expert, Dr. Jerome Salinger, a psychiatrist specializing in sleep disorders at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Meeting Holtz in the conference room, Salinger carried a thick file and the weary look of someone too long steeped in human behavior questions. "I reviewed the old medical records," he said, setting the papers down. "Daniel Harper has a history of parasomnia, sleepwalking with complex behaviors. Such individuals can perform organized actions without awareness. Some leave home, drive, even cook unconsciously. Notably, when they wake, they don't remember." Holtz nodded. "Could this explain Daniel's behavior the morning Linda disappeared?" Salinger clasped his hands, choosing words carefully. "Possibly. I've seen patients attack others during sleepwalking. The brain gets stuck between deep sleep and wakefulness. Behavior control shuts off, but motor reflexes remain. A strong trigger, like an argument, a startle, or loud noise, can prompt violent reactions without awareness." Mendez interjected. "But could he leave home, drive 6 miles, and hide a body while sleepwalking?" Salinger looked at him, smiling faintly. "That's what makes people skeptical. Parasomnia isn't magic, but rare cases show complex behaviors during episodes. Still, if he hid evidence, like the knife, it likely happened after waking. The brain can switch to survival mode, recognizing consequences and acting in panic, though memories remain fragmented." Holtz scribbled quickly. "So you're saying Daniel could have killed Linda in a sleepwalking state, then woke, panicked, and hid the knife without understanding why?" "Exactly. Or at least, his mind fragmented the memory so he couldn't piece the events together." Meanwhile, Prosecutor Amanda Torres received the preliminary report and immediately pushed back. In an internal meeting, she slapped the medical file on the table, voice firm. "Nobody sleepwalks, cleans a knife, stays silent for 35 years, and says I don't remember. This isn't parasomnia, it's concealment." The investigators around the table stayed quiet. Torres continued, eyes sharp. "We can't let a psychological excuse blur the crime's nature. A sleepwalker doesn't know what they're doing, but they also don't know how to keep a secret for decades." Holtz listened to Torres's feedback, nodding slightly. He wasn't surprised. It was the inevitable clash between science and law. The next morning, he and Mendez met Salinger again for clarity. "Doctor," Holtz asked, "if you had to testify, what would you say?" Salinger paused briefly. "I'd say, neurologically, parasomnia can cause someone to harm without awareness. But I can't confirm Daniel Harper's case without direct examination." "Can you do it?" Mendez asked. Salinger nodded. "I'd need to observe his sleep, measure brain waves, REM phase transitions. If there's a disorder, there'll be signs. But the results won't determine guilt or innocence, just whether his brain could produce violent sleepwalking." That afternoon, Holtz signed an order transferring Daniel Harper to the State Prison Medical Center for a 48-hour sleep study. He watched through a glass panel as the medical team attached electrodes to Daniel's temples, wrists, and chest. The man sat still, unresisting, asking only, "What are they looking for in my sleep?" Holtz replied, "The truth, if it's still there." For 2 nights, Daniel was monitored in a soundproof sleep room. Machines recorded thousands of brainwave patterns, oscillating between deep sleep and REM phases. At 3:17 a.m. on the second night, the monitor showed an abnormal spike, sudden phase shift, heart rate spiking, arm muscles twitching. Daniel sat up, eyes wide but vacant, right hand raised as if holding something. His lips moved, soundless. The duty doctor noted, "Somnambulism episode observed. Subject displays motor response without awareness." Reading the report the next morning, Holtz stayed silent for a long time. At the end, Salinger wrote, "Subject exhibits parasomnia with potential for complex motor behavior during non-REM sleep. Condition consistent with historical records. Cannot determine direct link to 1976 event." Mendez set the report down, saying quietly he might really have been sleepwalking. Holtz looked out the window, where fog was lifting from the lab's roof. Maybe, he said, voice low. But no one sleepwalks for 35 years and stays silent like that. If he truly doesn't remember, what he forgot isn't the guilt, it's the moment he became a killer. In the hallway, the duty light switched from red to green, signaling a new investigative day. In Holtz's hand, the 1973 hospital file and 2012 sleep study lay side by side, 4 decades apart, both about one man. Daniel Harper, sleeping, waking, and lost in the fragile boundary between the two. A week after the medical results, Lieutenant Edgar Holtz ordered the team to begin the final phase, reconstructing the 1976 Linda Harper crime scene. He wanted to tie all evidence together, not just on paper, but with visuals, distances, and real time. In the Dunn County Sheriff's Office's small meeting room, an old Elk Mound topographic map was spread across the table, next to a screen showing 2012 satellite imagery. The brown lines of dirt roads and faint green of the forest around Lake Wakanda looked nearly identical to 36 years prior, with only a few new houses and a paved road cutting through the fields. "We need to prove one thing," Holtz said, tapping the map lightly. "The route Daniel Harper could have taken from the house, through Menomonee Road, to the lake and back, matches the time Linda disappeared." Riley Mendez and 2 GIS technicians digitized all data. They inputted the old Harper house location, the spot where the bike was found, the lake shore where the jacket drifted, and the dirt road along the eastern forest. The software mapped a 6.3-mile route, with an average Ford F-100 travel time of 11 to 14 minutes in 1976 conditions, exactly the window between Linda leaving home and being reported missing. "The margin's just enough for a round trip," Mendez said, eyes fixed on the screen. "If he drove right after she left, he could have intercepted her at the bend near Menomonee Road and taken her without anyone seeing." Holtz nodded, requesting the crime scene images. Technicians recreated the route in 3D simulation. A green Ford moving slowly through fog, headlights sweeping the narrow road. A cyclist's shadow just dozens of meters ahead. When the truck stopped, the image faded to a hazy blur, silent, with only the time ticking in the corner, 7:12 a.m. Holtz circled the spot. "This is the last place anyone saw Linda." If Daniel was the one, he had enough time to drive to Lake Wakanda before 8 o'clock and return before her parents noticed. Mendez opened the tire track comparison. From the 1976 report, they knew the dual-axle tracks at the lake had a 63-inch tread width, specific to a 1975 Ford F-100. They found a similar truck in an old vehicle storage lot, fitted it with sensors, and drove it along the lake's dirt road. When it stopped, the front tires left marks in the muddy snow, nearly identical to the archived photos. Holtz checked the measurements, sighing, error margins less than half an inch. He stepped down, treading on the soft soil where the new tracks lay, eyes pensive. "Not just the same truck type," he said. "Same turn angle, same braking distance." The driver knew this terrain like the back of their hand. They tested motion models next. The software showed that an unfamiliar driver would struggle to turn around quickly at the lake, likely getting stuck in mud or hitting trees. But the 1976 Ford stopped at the only clear spot, just wide enough for a turnaround. Holtz tapped the console. This person had been here before. It's not random. Mendez fell silent, his gaze heavy. "He used to take Linda here to play as kids," he said softly. The 1975 family photo behind them is this lake shore. The room grew still. Holtz opened the old photo, Linda in her red jacket beaming, standing close to Daniel. In the background, the lake glimmered. He placed it beside the simulation. The two images chillingly aligned. "Same spot," he said. "Right here." That afternoon they conducted a field survey. Melted snow revealed brown mud, a damp, earthy smell rising. Holtz walked slowly along the lake's edge, eyeing exposed tree roots. "This is where Linda's jacket washed up," he said. "If someone tossed it from here, The current would push it to the middle, then to the south shore, right where the fisherman found it. He pointed to Mendez's small map. Everything fits: wind direction, water depth, drift time. Nothing's random. As the sky grayed, they returned to the office. Mendez saved all data, exporting a visual report. On the screen, the complete 3D model showed the October 15, 1976, journey from the Harper house, down the dirt road, the forest bend, to Lake Wakanda. A green truck stopped. A small figure vanished in the fog, then the truck turned away. Holtz watched the simulation, voice slow but firm. "We just proved what Colburn could only suspect. Linda didn't vanish. She was taken, and the one who took her knew every inch of this place." Mendez closed the laptop, eyes weary. "I've seen hundreds of cases, but none where the line between guilt and unconsciousness felt so thin. If he really didn't know what he did." Holtz cut in, voice hoarse. Then memory itself became the criminal. He stood, looking out the window. Outside, the late winter sun sank behind snowy hills. In the faint light, Lake Wakanda appeared like a misty mirror, reflecting what was once buried. Holtz said softly, "Tomorrow we take this simulation to the prosecutor. It's time the jury saw what Linda saw last: the road to the lake and the man behind the wheel." 3 months after the team completed the crime scene reconstruction, the Linda Mae Harper case file was sent to the Dunn County prosecutor's office. On an early April 2012 morning, in a room lined with crime maps and old files, Prosecutor Amanda Torres opened the 300-plus page dossier. Its cover boldly stamped, "State of Wisconsin vs. Daniel Emir Harper Torres, 42, was known for her meticulousness, never filing charges with any doubt." She sat for hours, rereading Holtz's notes, forensic reports, scene photos, and the 3D simulation. Before her were 3 pillars of evidence: matching DNA, a weapon consistent with the jacket's tier, and a simulation proving the timing and location were logically sound. Setting down the final page, Torres knew the case could no longer wait. That afternoon, in an internal meeting, Holtz and Mendez presented the full evidence chain. Torres stood, pointing to the screen, the red jacket under UV, the folding knife, soil-caked shoes, and a 99.99% DNA match chart. "Everything aligns, no breaks," she said. "But we need to prepare for the defense's response. They'll push the parasomnia defense." Holtz nodded. "Dr. Salinger will be their witness." He confirmed Daniel's sleep disorder. Torres replied, voice sharp, "I'm ready." "We'll have Dr. Mark Presley, behavioral neurologist, worked on Parks Fierce, Canada. He can debunk violent sleepwalking lasting long enough to hide a weapon." She turned to Mendez, "Confirm the timeline again. We need the jury to understand Daniel had the time, opportunity, and motive." Mendez opened the summary. 7:05, Linda leaves home. 7:12, witness sees green Ford on Menomonee Road. 7:35, jacket gone. 8 o'clock, truck returns. The round trip takes 25 minutes, fitting the gap in Daniel's statement. Torres nodded slightly. "Good, now motive." Holtz spoke, "Family argument about Linda wanting to leave home." Daniel opposed it. Neighbors confirmed hearing them argue the night before. Torres jotted notes quickly. First-degree murder needs 3 elements: intent, act, concealment. He denies memory, but hiding the knife and cleaning the truck prove concealment happened. That's enough. That afternoon, she visited Daniel Harper in jail, not to interrogate, but to see the man she'd soon prosecute. Daniel was brought to the visitation room. Hands on the table, eyes oddly calm. Torres studied him for a moment, then said, "Anything you want to say before we take this to court?" Daniel gave a faint smile, replying, "I just hope you find the truth, even if it hurts me. Because maybe I want to know it too." Back at her office, Torres sat long before a blank charging document. She didn't trust remorseful-sounding words, but his statement unsettled her. She knew some cases blurred the line between guilt and pathology in terrifying ways. But the law didn't side with emotion. She put pen to paper, writing the first line. "The state of Wisconsin hereby charges that on or about October 15, 1976, The defendant, Daniel M. Harper, did intentionally cause the death of Linda M. Harper, in violation of Wisconsin Statute Section 940(01), first-degree intentional homicide. When the red ink stamped the page's corner, the file gained legal weight. From that moment, the Linda Harper case was no longer a cold case. It was a first-degree homicide awaiting trial. On May 12, 2012, the indictment was announced. Wisconsin media reported in unison, "Cold case from 1976. Reopened, brother arrested in Elk Mound disappearance." Daniel Harper's photo from jail, gaunt face, sunken eyes, appeared on the front page of the Dunn County Herald. Charles held a brief press conference outside the Dunn County Sheriff's Office. Behind her stood Lieutenant Holtz and Agent Mendez. Her voice was clear, not loud, but firm. "We believe the scientific evidence speaks clearer than any testimony. Justice may come late, but it comes." The statement aired on evening news and became the next day's headline. Meanwhile, Daniel's legal team prepared a counterattack. Defense attorney Henry Lowe, court-appointed, announced they would rely on the parasomnia evaluation, arguing the defendant lacked criminal intent at the time of the act. The media dubbed it Wisconsin's first sleepwalking case. Holtz knew the coming months wouldn't be easy. He and Mendez spent nearly the entire summer working with the prosecution, preparing witnesses and arranging evidence in the most compelling sequence. They recreated the crime scene in a mock trial, presenting the full investigation from the 1976 hair to the 2012 arrest warrant. In September, the Menomonee County Court set October 15, 2012, exactly 36 years after Linda's disappearance, as the trial's start date. When the announcement was made, Holtz stood by his office window, watching early snowflakes fall. "God picks his days," he said quietly. Tories closed the file, looking up. Maybe Linda Harper has waited long enough. On the indictment's cover, the court's seal stood bold in blood red. State of Wisconsin versus Daniel M. Harper. Court date, October 15, 2012. In the heavy silence of that late autumn afternoon, everyone understood the decades-long investigation had left the sheriff's desk to step into the light of justice, where truth would no longer be analyzed under microscopes, but through human words. On the morning of October 15, 2012, Menomonee's sky was overcast. White fog cloaking the old downtown roofs. The Dunn County Courthouse was busier than usual. Reporters, Elk Mound residents, and law students packed the halls. Outside, Wisconsin's state flag whipped in the cold autumn wind. 36 years after Linda Harper vanished, the town's first cold case trial began. Inside the courtroom, soft yellow light glowed, and hard-soled shoes echoed on polished wood floors. In the front row, Lieutenant Edgar Holtz sat with Agent Riley Mendez, men who'd lived with this case for nearly a year. Above the judge's bench was draped in deep green, a gilded justice emblem centered. The clock struck 9 o'clock as Judge David Kellen tapped his gavel, voice resonant. The Dunn County Court, State of Wisconsin, officially opens the trial of State of Wisconsin versus Daniel M. Harper. Daniel Harper was led in. He wore a pale blue shirt, no cuffs, gray hair neatly trimmed. He looked small, almost blending into the dark wood backdrop. Asked to confirm his identity, he said only, "Yes, I'm Daniel Harper." His voice was calm, neither high nor low, as if rehearsed hundreds of times. Prosecutor Amanda Torres opened with a nearly hour-long statement. Her voice was clear, steady, and cold as steel. "Your Honor, today we speak not of speculation or memory, but of evidence. The only thing time doesn't change. We have DNA, artifacts, soil, a knife, and science." She held up a slim file, light catching the cover. Forensic Report 2012, Harper Case. 36 years ago, police lacked the tools to decode this. Today, a single hair says what Linda never could. She projected a large image, a blonde hair under a microscope, next to a 99.99% DNA match chart with Daniel Harper's samples. The room fell silent, only the click of reporters' pens and the projector's hum audible. Torres continued. We will present 3 evidence groups: physical, biological, and scene reconstruction. Each, alone, is strong enough to confirm guilt. Combined, they form an unbreakable chain. A forensic technician stepped forward, opening a sealed metal box containing the military folding knife. Its blade appeared on screen, rusted brown, handle faintly etched with military numbers. Torres said, "We found type O blood, matching the victim. A red polyester fiber in the hinge matches Linda Harper's jacket." She signaled. 2 staff unrolled a large screen, a 3D reconstruction of the route, from the Harper house to Lake Wakanda. A green streak simulated the Ford F-100's path, every meter matching the time of Linda's disappearance. "This isn't a theory," Torres said. "It's math. Every second of this journey is based on real data. And only one person drove that truck, knew that route, took Linda from home that day." Torres paused, voice lowering. Daniel Harper. At the defendant's table, Daniel sat still. He looked at the screen, green light reflecting on his face, making his eyes seem vacant. No trembling, no bowed head, no reaction. Only Holtz, in the gallery, noticed his fingers briefly tighten on his knee when the red jacket appeared. When the prosecution paused, Judge Kellen nodded. Defense. Attorney Henry Lowe, middle-aged with salt and pepper hair and a calm demeanor, stepped to the podium. He carried only a pen and a small photo. His voice was low, slightly hoarse. "Your Honor, I don't deny the Harper family's pain or the investigator's dedication. But justice can't rest on regret. It must rest on certainty. And in this case, there is no certainty." He paused, scanning the room. No witnesses. No one saw Daniel Harper kill his sister. No one saw that truck at the lake. All we have are vague artifacts, found after 36 years. 36 years long enough for time to erase, for assumptions to replace truth. Lowe approached the evidence table, lightly touching the red jacket in its glass bag. "This is the coat the prosecution claims holds all answers, but it sat in cold storage for 35 years, through hundreds of winters, moved, touched, dusted. Now, a hair on the collar is said to prove a crime. But what if it's just a hair from the same house where siblings live? Can science say that's impossible?" He turned, voice growing firm. "DNA doesn't tell stories. It just exists. It can't say when or why." The room stayed silent. Holtz folded his arms, eyes cold, while Mendez scribbled fast. Torres remained calm, but her hand tightened slightly on her pen. Lowe continued, "And this, Daniel Harper doesn't deny his sleep disorder. His 1973 hospital records confirm he sleepwalked. We'll prove that, if anything happened that morning, it wasn't conscious, but a pathology. A sleepwalking episode can make someone walk, talk, even do something terrible without awareness. Can we call that intentional murder?" He paused, facing the jury. "I ask only that you remember, the smallest doubt is the line between justice and error." As Lowe returned to his table, Judge Kellen called a brief recess. The jury left, and the room's air felt heavy enough to cut. Torres stood beside Holtz, saying quietly, "He's planting doubt, and he's doing it well." Holtz replied, "Don't worry. When they see the numbers, those seeds won't grow." That afternoon, the court resumed with physical evidence. A large photo appeared on screen, the red jacket under forensic lights, UV streaks sparkling on the fabric. Torres stepped forward, saying softly, "This isn't just evidence. It's Linda Harper's only witness." As the lights dimmed for the projection, the room glowed blue-purple. Some jurors bowed their heads. An older woman in the second row covered her mouth. In that silence, the wall clock ticked slowly, as if reminding everyone that 36 years hadn't erased that moment. Daniel Harper sat motionless. He didn't turn away, didn't bow, just stared at the screen. The reflected light made his face pale, his eyes like dark hollows. Mendez, looking over Holtz's shoulder, whispered, "Not a single reaction, like he's watching someone else's memory." When the image shifted to the folding knife, cold light glinted. Holtz recalled the morning they found it in Daniel's house, tucked in a metal box, silent, waiting to be named. Now it lay in the courtroom, where justice would measure every rust mark on its blade. The judge tapped his gavel, ending the first trial day. Torres gathered her files, standing still as the room emptied. Holtz approached, saying quietly, 36 years to get here, now it's just his word. Torres replied, no, now it's just the faith of 12 people. Outside, snow began falling lightly, dusting the cold stone steps. In the dark, the courthouse lights burned, like a lantern guarding the past, illuminating what Linda Harper left behind, awaiting truth's judgment tomorrow. The second trial day began with what the media called the clash of science and justice. Two anticipated figures entered the courtroom, Dr. Jerome Salinger, the defense's psychiatrist, and Dr. Mark Presley, a behavioral neurologist from the University of Minnesota, advising the prosecution. Both were heavyweights in sleep disorders, but today they stood on opposing sides, one proving Daniel Harper was a victim of his own brain, the other asserting his actions were deliberate. The courtroom was packed. The jury sat attentively. Elk Mound residents filled the back rows. In the front, Daniel Harper sat between two lawyers, head bowed, hands clasped, his usual silent posture. Prosecutor, Amanda Torres, in a gray suit, prepared her files. When Judge Kellen signaled the start, her voice rang clear. The court will hear testimony from Dr. Jerome Salinger, the defense's expert witness. Salinger stood, thin, white-haired, eyes intense behind thin glasses. He took the oath, then was guided by defense attorney Henry Lowe. Lowe began slowly. Doctor, you've reviewed Daniel Harper's medical records, correct? Yes. The 1973 records, diagnosing sleepwalking disorder, parasomnia. Can you explain to the jury what parasomnia is? Salinger nodded. Parasomnia is a group of disorders occurring in deep sleep, when the brain's cognitive control is off, but motor functions remain active. Patients can perform complex actions, walking, talking, even using objects, without awareness. They often remember nothing after waking. Lowe stepped closer. In that state, could someone act violently, without intent? Yes, Salinger replied without hesitation. In rare cases, fear, stress, or external stimuli can trigger extreme reactions, attacking others unconsciously. It's called violent parasomnia. At least 12 cases have been documented worldwide in the past 4 decades. He turned to the jury, voice lowering. They aren't murderers. They're people trapped between sleep and reality. When they wake, they don't know what they've done. Lowe pressed, given your knowledge and data, do you believe this could have happened to Daniel Harper on that October 1976 morning? Salinger answered, highly likely. He has a documented parasomnia history, confirmed by medical records and the 2012 sleep study. His brainwave patterns show abrupt, non-REM phase shifts, typical of complex sleepwalking. I believe Daniel Harper entered an automatic, uncontrolled behavioral state. The room stirred. Some sighed softly, others shook their heads. Holtz, in the gallery, narrowed his eyes. Mendez scribbled, planting emotion. Torres stood, Your Honor, the prosecution requests to cross-examine the witness. The judge nodded. Proceed. Torres approached, her gaze cold and precise as a scalpel. Dr. Salinger, you describe parasomnia as if it excuses any action. So I ask, in a sleepwalking state, could someone leave their bed, drive 6 miles to a lake, hide a weapon, and leave no trace for 35 years? Salinger replied slowly, very rare, but theory doesn't rule it out. In an automatic state, they can perform seemingly purposeful actions, though they're just reflex chains. Torres gave a slight, not friendly, smile. Reflex? Doctor. A reflex that packs a knife, stores it in a shed, and dusts it for 3 decades. A reflex that stays silent to police, lives calmly for years. Salinger tilted his head. I'm only addressing the behavior at the time, not what followed. Torres stepped closer, voice pressing, exactly. Because afterward, he remembered enough to hide everything. That's not the behavior of someone unconscious. It's someone afraid. The courtroom's tension was taut as a wire. Salinger replied slowly, "I'm not excusing him. I'm describing brain mechanics." Torres paused, scanning the room, then told the jury parasomnia might make someone wander the house. But no one sleepwalks, drives, hides a weapon, and lives on like nothing happened. That's not sleep, that's choice. That afternoon, Dr. Mark Presley took the stand. Tall, broad-shouldered, voice firm. Torres asked briefly, "Doctor, can you share your opinion on the defendant's sleep study results?" Presley flipped through his file. The results show mild sleep disruption, but no evidence of complex parasomnia. His brain waves shift quickly, typical of someone who wakes easily, not someone stuck in sleepwalking. So, in your view, the violent behavior in this case couldn't be from sleepwalking. Impossible, Presley replied. A sleepwalking episode might cause defensive reactions if startled, like pushing or grabbing, but it can't sustain sequential actions like driving, choosing a route, or hiding evidence. Those are deliberate, conscious behaviors. The defense objected, impossible, or just undocumented, Doctor. Presley looked directly. Science doesn't rely on the undocumented. The room chuckled softly. Low-pressed, do you agree Daniel Harper could have been in a panic or temporary dissociative state, leading to memory loss? Presley answered, dissociation isn't sleepwalking. It's a psychological mechanism, not neurological. If he panicked after waking, it shows he was aware of what he did. Torres smiled, stepping up. Thank you, Doctor. As Presley left, the room buzzed again. Two experts had spoken, two opposing worlds laid bare, one believing a person could kill unconsciously, the other insisting every action stemmed from intent. Over the next 8 trial days, Wisconsin's public opinion split. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel called it the trial of two sleeps. TV stations replayed the heated Salinger-Presley debate, with Torres's line quoted repeatedly, "No one sleepwalks and knows how to hide guilt." Outside the courthouse, residents held signs, "Justice for Linda," and "Daniel Harper deserves truth." Each day, the halls stayed packed, while Holtz and Mendez quietly observed each session. By the 8th day, when the judge called a recess for closing arguments, no one in the room was certain. Torres had science and evidence, but Lowe had sown doubt about a man half awake, half dreaming. Holtz stepped outside, breathing the biting air. Mendez followed, asking quietly, "What do you think, Lieutenant?" Holtz looked at the gray sky. Science says he could be unconscious. The law says he could be deliberate. But Linda, she didn't get to choose between the two, and that's what makes his guilt clearest to me. That night, a news broadcast replayed Salinger's final testimony. Asked, "Doctor, do you believe Daniel Harper is a murderer?" He replied, "I believe he caused that death. But I don't know if he was truly awake." A neutral statement, but enough to divide Wisconsin between faith in evidence and fear that a person could become a killer in their own sleep. On the 9th day of the trial, Menomonee was shrouded in sleet. The streets were empty, shops closed early, but the Dunn County courthouse remained lit. All of Wisconsin awaited the verdict for a case, spanning 36 years, the case dubbed "The Girl in the Fog." Inside the courtroom, Judge David Kellen finished his final instructions to the jury. The 12 members, 8 men, 4 women, were asked to retire to the deliberation room. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence. No one in the room spoke. Prosecutor Amanda Torres leaned against the wall, hands clasped tightly, while Lieutenant Holtz and Riley Mendez sat in the back row, eyes fixed on the empty defendant's chair. Daniel Harper had been taken to a holding room. 6 hours. The wall clock's hands moved so slowly it felt like the gears were grinding. Torres looked out the window. Snow fell silently like ash. Outside, reporters waited, cameras covered in plastic, breath steaming in the cold wind. Near 8 o'clock that evening, a bell sounded. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom stirred at once. The judge returned to the bench, tapping his gavel. The court calls the defendant, Daniel M. Harper. The door opened, and Daniel entered, calm, eyes downcast. He sat silently between two officers, saying nothing. The jury returned, their foreperson, a middle-aged man in a brown suit, holding a folded white paper. The room's air grew so thick, only the rustle of the paper was audible as he opened it. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Read it." The man took a deep breath. "We, the Dunn County jury, State of Wisconsin, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, find the defendant Daniel M. Harper guilty of second-degree manslaughter under Wisconsin Statute, Section 940.05. Murmurs spread through the room. Torres closed her eyes briefly, hands gripping the table's edge. Mendez bowed his head, exhaling, while Holtz sat still, his gaze darkening. Judge Kellen nodded, voice slow. "The verdict is received. The jury concludes the defendant's actions caused Linda Harper's death, but lack sufficient evidence of intentional murder. The defendant will be sentenced per second-degree manslaughter guidelines." He looked at Daniel. "Mr. Harper, stand." Daniel complied, hands trembling slightly, but standing straight. The judge studied him for a long moment, then said, "You've lived over half your life with this. The evidence shows you're responsible for your sister's death. Conscious or not, this court sentences you to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 12 years with proof of rehabilitation and good faith." The room fell utterly silent. Yellow light bathed Daniel's face, deepening the wrinkles around his eyes like carvings in wood. He bowed his head, neither arguing nor objecting. As an officer stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder, he said softly, "I understand." Before striking the gavel, Judge Kellen added, voice slow and firm, resonating in the quiet room, "Justice sometimes travels through many winters, but it never loses its way. This case proves that truth can be buried, but never forgotten." The gavel struck 3 times. The courtroom sank into absolute stillness. Torres exhaled, her heart slowing for the first time in months. She turned to Holtz. Not a life sentence, but at least Linda was heard. Holtz nodded slightly, eyes still on the chair where Daniel had sat. "Justice is never perfect," he said, "but today, it's close enough." In the hallway, reporters surged forward. Flashes sparked, microphones raised. Torres said briefly, "We respect the court's verdict. This isn't a victory, it's a conclusion." In the transport van leaving the courthouse, Daniel sat silently, staring out the window where snow swirled under streetlights. Mendez, in the back, looked through the glass partition and saw him murmur something. It wasn't clear, but it seemed to be 2 words. "Sorry, Linda." As the van disappeared, Holtz stood on the courthouse steps, hands in his coat pockets, breath dissolving in the cold wind. He thought of Sheriff Colburn, who wrote the final line in the old file. No body recovered. 36 years later, Holtz could add, truth recovered. That night, the news opened with Judge Kellen's words, "Justice comes late, but never loses its way." Images of Daniel Harper, leaving the courtroom, head bowed, alternated with an old photo of Linda in her red jacket, her smile blurred against a foggy backdrop. At Dunn County, a small plaque was erected by Lake Wakanda, where locals still fished each summer. It read, "In memory of Linda Mae Harper, she was found not by sight, but by truth." Holtz visited one late afternoon, placing a small bouquet by the plaque. He looked at the calm lake, its clear water reflecting the fading sky. 36 years, generations changed, yet the water remained as still as that morning. He whispered, as if to Colburn, Linda, and himself, "No one can give you back the years lost. But at least we brought your name out of the fog." Then he turned away, snow falling again, slow and light, like the final breath of a story now closed. On October 28, 2012, 2 weeks after the verdict, Dunn County's morning was cloaked in thin fog. The sheriff's office was unusually quiet, only the photocopier's hum and faint coffee scent lingering. Lieutenant Edgar Holtz sat in the records room, facing the thick file labeled #76H214, Harper, Linda Mae. The worn dossier, its spine frayed, held yellowed pages bearing 3.5 decades of investigation. Now, his final task was to close it. An archivist accompanied Holtz to the evidence vault. The long hallway's neon lights reflected on gray concrete floors. Evidence boxes sat silently on shelves, each a story untold or a conclusion written late. At the end, slot 47 Bay stood empty, waiting. Holtz placed a new sealed box on the table. Inside were the military folding knife, leather shoes, red jacket fragment, and trial video. All were renumbered, cleaned, and labeled with fresh white tags. The box's lid bore red text, State of Wisconsin, case, #76, each 214, closed. October 2012. The technician confirmed with a signature, then placed the box in the slot. As the steel door closed, its hinges creaked softly, like a lock sealing the past. Holtz stood watching for a long time. He didn't think of victory, only an odd emptiness, as if, when justice was restored, part of the memory was buried too. That afternoon, he returned to his office. On his desk sat a cold coffee cup and a black and white photo of Linda Harper in a wooden frame. The 17-year-old, hair tied high, smiled faintly at the camera, unaware of tragedy. Holtz opened his investigation notebook, its pages dense with handwritten notes. He flipped to the final blank line, took his fountain pen, dark blue ink, and wrote slowly. 36 years later, the truth spoke. E. Holtz, 2012. He paused, set the pen down, and looked at the slanted words under the lamp's light. Outside, the faint sunset bathed the golden autumn fields. Mendez entered, carrying 2 hot coffees. "I heard the Harper files closed," he said. Feeling relieved, Holtz gave a tired but warm smile. "Not quite. This work never truly ends. We just learn to let go." He looked up at the board of unsolved cases, each with cold numbers, faded faces. "But today, at least one of them has a name on the found list." Mendez nodded. "Do you think Daniel Harper really doesn't remember?" Holtz looked at his coffee, steam rising. "Maybe he does. But sometimes, memory's so terrifying the brain erases it. I don't know what's worse, committing a crime and forgetting or remembering forever without fixing it." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the wall clock's steady ticks echoed, a reminder that time moved on, even if everything else stopped. The next day, the final report went to DOJ Madison. On the digital archive, the Harper file's status changed from open to closed. Small line appeared. Finalized October 29, 2012. Authorized by Lieutenant Edgar Holtz. From that moment, the Linda Harper case entered Wisconsin's cold case history as one of the state's longest and most meticulously resolved. The media reported briefly, no longer sensational, Elk Mound cold case officially closed. Only one photo was republished, Holtz by Lake Wakanda, hat in hand, wind ruffling his gray coat. Below was his post-trial quote, "No case is ever truly old, only unheard." As night fell, Holtz left the office late. He stopped his car by the lake, where Linda's memorial stood. On the water, October's moonlight shimmered like metal. He knelt, touching the engraved words, "She was found not by sight, but by truth." A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh mud and distant wood smoke. Holtz closed his eyes, hearing the wind rustle through old oaks. He pictured that 1976 autumn morning, a girl biking down a foggy dirt road, her red jacket the last flash of color before vanishing. Now it was only an echo, a faint voice in memory, heard after 36 years. Before leaving, he opened his notebook again, adding a final line in Vietnamese he'd learned in his youth, just 4 words. "The truth has spoken." Then he closed the book, tucked it into his coat, and turned from the lake. In the distance, Menomonie's lights glowed against the cold sky like stars. Holtz walked slowly to his car, breath fading in the crisp air. The car door shut. The engine started, but he didn't leave immediately. In the rearview mirror, he glanced at the lake one last time. Its surface a flat mirror reflecting the moon, where the shadow of a solitary man had just closed a 36-year journey. At DOJ Madison, in the cold storage vault, the evidence box labeled "Closed 2012" sat silently among thousands. No one would open it again, but on its lid, Holtz's black ink remained clear, unfaded. 36 years later, the truth spoke. The story of the Linda Mae Harper case in Elk Mound, Wisconsin, is not just a criminal file closed after 36 years, but a mirror reflecting today's American society, where justice, memory, and science intersect in the quest for truth. From a single hair left in a red jacket, investigators reconstructed a case time seemed to have erased. It reminds us that in a modern society with advanced technology, persistence and honesty remain justice's foundation. No technology can replace humanity if we lose faith in truth. But the story also reveals a darker side, psychological disorders, and silent isolation in contemporary American life. Daniel Harper wasn't a model of deliberate crime, but an example of someone with an overlooked psychological issue, parasomnia, the thin line between waking and dreaming. In a society valuing productivity and silencing weakness, such conditions can be ignored until tragedy strikes. Thus, the greatest lesson lies not just in solving the case, but in understanding and investing in community mental health, so no one lives a life half awake, half dreaming, like Daniel. Finally, when Lieutenant Holtz wrote the file's final line, 36 years later, the truth spoke. It wasn't just a case's end, but a reminder that justice may come late, but only to those who never stop seeking it. In today's world, amid misinformation, bias, and weariness, every American must hold to something simple: let truth speak, even if it's as small as a hair left from the past. If you believe justice, though late, is worth finding, please subscribe to our channel to join us in listening to these cases that speak. Thank you for following Linda Mae Harper's story, and we'll see you in the next episode where another case, thought to be asleep, is awakened by the truth.